know what, kid? If you make it to 1,000 jumps, if you live to 1,000 jumps, you're going to be pretty good.
If you live. That's got to be a little scary.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a higher stakes thing.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Roe Show. This week we have a Skysurfer. Sean MacCormac is an expert skydiver and wind tunnel flyer, but he also jumps into thunderstorms on a snowboard. Yeah, he's a pretty cool guy, and he's going to tell us all about what it's like going through these thunderstorms and what goes through his mind when he's doing such scary stunts. There are not a lot of people that would ever do something so crazy, so I wanted to bring him on board and have him share his experiences with you, so you get a deeper look into the mind of these extreme athletes. Alright guys, let's go. Sean MacCormac.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on this show. I really want to hear about how you jumped through a thunderstorm. I get already tingly just thinking about going through thunderstorms when I'm in a plane, and never mind out in the real world. That's just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it's one of those. I think that's one of the things that had the appeal of it in its own way for many people, was it's something that is relatable. And like, we all feel that. Like when you feel just the ominous massiveness of a storm and lightning cracking over from the time you're a little kid all the way to you're adults, like that affects you. You feel it, and as an experience, you know, the best way that I could try and articulate it is that it is the most humbling feeling that really gives you a sense of the minute scale of you in your place in the universe and how outrageously empowering that is.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I want to get to that story, but before, for our audience, we should get into a little bit more behind the scenes of how does Sean MacCormac actually get to be able to do that in the first place. Can you give us a little bit of behind the scenes of exactly what got you into skysurfing?
I started skydiving in the 90s. I did a tandem in New York City, just outside of New York, at a place called The Ranch, and I fell in love with the skydiving experience on my very first jump, and I had to wait for winter to be over, and then that next summer I went and I got certified right away, which is its own, you know, long, crazy story. But and when I was skydiving and jumping, especially at that time, there wasn't a lot of people that were flying very acrobatically, you know, or stylistically, I don't know how else to put it, with style, you know. But very early I saw this picture of, like, at the time there was just maybe freestyle. There was like a couple of women that would like flip around, you know, in tights or something. But there was nothing, you know, expressive like that. Everyone kind of flew very flat and belly to earth, like what you would see is how a student flies. And I saw, and this is everyone, like the entire sport was flying essentially on their belly almost, you know. There was a couple of people that would fly around in a sit position, and like, that's about it, you know. And then I saw this picture. Sorry?
No, I was saying that's crazy because there's a lot of parallels in our industry. But yeah, please finish your story.
So yeah, no, it seemed really like anybody that's creative or that like you'd imagine people like, you know, diving into space, you know, out of a plane. You'd imagine them doing all these like wild things, you know, but that's not what they were doing. You know, people were doing wild stuff for sure, but on the creative, through a creative lens, maybe not as much at that time. And I saw this picture of this guy skysurfing, and it was like the most futuristic and cool looking thing I had ever seen. This guy, I mean, Rob Harris at the time, who's now kind of like the patron saint of skysurfing in my mind, you know, but he was like this super smooth flying kid with just that just made this thing look effortless and had this sort of level of control and power with it that you were like, oh my God, you can fly a board, right? And I basically, looked around the ad and I called the company that made the boards and was inquiring about, learning to do it. And at the time, I'm on the phone at the drop zone, and I think I had, at the time, about 60 jumps. And the guy's like, well, we only teach in California. I'm like, well, I can fly out there, And he's like, okay, well, you have to have a minimum of 500 jumps. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I got that. And he's like, you have to have, about, I had 50, not 500, And he's like, and you got to, do some freestyle or free flying. I'm like, oh, yeah, for sure. I'm like, what's freestyle, But I just knew that this was my thing. I don't know how else it's like a calling. And I basically lied my ass off, and I flew out there. I had a bunch of gymnastics and, martial arts and dance sort of experience just as a physicality background. And then I went out to California, did some skydives with this guy, and it went, like, amazing. And on my flight, while I was flying home, the owner of the company called my drop zone at the time, and where I flew, and was like, hey, I don't know if you guys have any interest, but your skydiver that came out here to learn the skydiving, to learn skysurfing was, like, prodigious. Like, this kid's amazing. You should sponsor this guy. It's because, this is X Games stuff, and it's like, this kid's like something. You got to check it out. And they're like, what are you talking about? What skydiver? So I had 50 jumps. Nobody knew who I was in my airport, And they were just like, you taught this guy to skysurf? Like, you're a criminal. And he's like, what? And long story short, I was competing in the X Games very shortly after that. It went really.
That is really cool. So you basically started off by just kind of trying it out almost as a tourist, fell in love with it, then basically manipulated your way to a career in it. That is really, really cool. It's very interesting, and that actually brings me.
It's a super abbreviated version of it. There was a ton of training, and
well, that's what I wanted to get into next. Was that what is the certification process? What is the training that goes into it? Can you give us a bit more detail on exactly what it takes to first be a skydiver, but then get into the actual sky surfing as the second stage?
Yeah, absolutely, and each of those stages are a long process, and in a lot of ways that it's become more accelerated now, and I'll explain. But for you to get certified, it takes it's 8 levels that consist of you passing 8 jumps or levels, and each one basically has you going from a tandem to jumping with 2 instructors, holding on to you, to 1 instructor holding on to you, to 1 just sort of shadowing you over the course of these 8 jumps. And then by the 8th jump, you're certified to jump solo. And then after that, you go through this. There's these a B license, a B, a C, a D license, a pro rating, and those are kind of just various, certifications. Your A license allows you to jump with other people, right? Which is pretty crucial if you want to jump with a camera or do anything, But until you get your A license, which you get at about 25 jumps, you will have the ability to jump with other people. Have people film you that aren't a coach, or play with people and fly, right? Which is fun and one of the best parts of skydiving. And then as you progress with those ratings, they enable you to do demonstrations or land in smaller places. It just opens up your sort of playing field, as it were. And for you to get your D license, by that time it was about 500 jumps, and that was like you could be a coach, or you could start to get ratings and that kind of thing once you have your D license. So I ended up getting just because I fell in love with skydiving as a tourist for sure. And then I was skydiving, and I didn't necessarily. I was in love with skydiving pretty instantly. I lived in New York City at the time, and I was, every chance I got, I would hop on my motorcycle and I would race up to the ranch, and I was trying to jump. Customarily, especially in the Northeast, a sport jumper will probably do 200 to 400 jumps for like a hardcore sport jumper. Like 400 jumps would be an insane amount of jumps. They'd be like there all the time. And
is that per season?
I was trying to. Yeah, that's per season for a sport jumper. That's a lot of jumping. That would be like you're there every weekend jumping, all day every weekend all year, kind of thing, because you get weather and those things that you're kind of battling. And at that time, there wasn't a wind tunnel or anything else. So for you to accumulate those 50 jumps, sometimes it could take you a while if you're not working there at the drop zone or something like that. When I was training for my first competition that I went to on my own initiative, I went to California. I learned that discipline and learned the gear of the Skysurfing equipment. And then I came home, and that same Skysurf coach, when my drop zone was not so receptive, at the same time he had ended up calling who was one of the guys that was the current gold X Games gold medalist, and who ended up becoming my mentor and my first real sponsor and coach for a couple of years, actually. I left. I ended up leaving New York after my first comp and going to Florida and working with him, and basically went from being a sport jumper, my first X Games trials, where I had a really spectacular performance that he ended up kind of gravitating towards and helping me out. Actually, even before that, but Bob Greiner was his name, and he was the coach that really, like I said, ended up mentoring me and guiding me. I was very young at the time. I was 18, 19, and I moved to Florida and went from doing 300 or 400 jumps in a year to doing over 1,000 jumps a year, and that's what really just accelerated all of my everything.
So is that would be the big difference between you and the other competitors, or you just got lots more numbers in than some of them could because of your affiliation with your mentor?
At that time, the people that were competing were already getting those jumps. Me personally, I
let you catch up to them then.
Was giving a training opportunity, that definitely exponentially changed everything for me personally when I first got my first sponsorship. Because the first X Games trial that I went to kind of on my own time and dime, and that was a very challenging thing to do. And then when I went to that comp and was connected with him, I ended up moving to Florida to the drop zone that he was working at, and got a full sponsorship there. And that just elevated my own personal training experience and opportunity as a sport jumper. That was like an incredible or unheard of opportunity. It's sort of a mix of things, because there's a lot of jumping that you have to survive, which, can have its, lots of trials and tribulations. Sure, we'll see lots of, it's not bowling. It's definitely a higher stakes game, and the consequences are pretty dire. I think there's not a lot of injuries you know, I think it's
either
more,
you make it or you don't, and so you're not getting much injuries. Yeah, it's. Can I ask, while we're talking about injuries, what is the death rate, or what is the risk of that happening, and what's the common factor that makes it happen?
Well, a lot of things have changed in that particular department, in the sense that, a lot of things, like the equipment has changed a lot, and there's been the development of something called a wind tunnel, which has really kind of revolutionized both itself and as far as its from its original state. A wind tunnel now is like a state-of-the-art room that you can fly in, and that has just made learning safer, has made, learning, experimenting, developing your baseline skills. It's become such an incredible tool that's safer. Like in our discipline, learning to fly head down for some people can be very challenging.
What do you mean by
for some reason,
sorry, what do you mean by head down?
So, when you're in flying, skydiving, you can fly in basically any full 360 orientation that you can imagine. You can, one of the things that's amazing about flying in the air like that is that basically you are creating a shape with your body and pitching it at various angles, and that's going to change your speed, and how you're flying. So I can make a shape with my body and suddenly be flying across the sky at over 100 miles per hour. I can try and get very big and fly as slow as down as 120, or I can kind of point myself head down like a needle at the earth and get up to almost 300 miles per hour.
300 miles per hour.
You can be, I can create spins with my board at the X Games. I was invented a move called the Invisible Man, where I was just doing self-propelled spins that were exceeding 12 revolutions per second.
What? How do you do that?
So the board, and this is one of the board, once you learn to master it, the board can be either a propeller or a wing. It's always, let me put it this way, the board is always, while it's attached to you, going to be either a propeller or a wing, and it's either going to be a propeller or a wing by your flying and choosing, or its own. So you're better off doing the flying choosing. And once you learn to kind of use this dynamic wing, then all of a sudden everything is effortless, right? You're really using, you're pitching the board, and that's fully rotating you or spinning you. And for that Invisible Man, I would basically be creating a propeller with the wing and my arms, and that would almost equate to like an offset or like a two prop stacked, where the board would be one prop below me, and I'd be creating this propeller action and bring my arms together, and then use the centrifugal force of this spin, where as you start to go faster, the centrifugal force is starting to want to pull your arms away from each other and out, and by pulling them in and pulling on that centrifugal force and kind of manipulating that, it would increase the speed just incredibly. When I was first learning it in that process, I ended up having on a couple of jumps before I really understood what was happening. My hands would be thrown out, like I was trying to stop the spin, like, okay, I need to stop, and I wasn't learning, and I'd throw my hands out trying to get control, and then all the blood would leave my torso and race into my hands, and I got like a capillary damage, and it was like I had like a temporary like paralysis where I couldn't like close my fists, which made it hard to land and pull and all that other stuff. and I was making a homemade kind of G-suit where I would put like a tiger balm on my arms and then wrap it tightly with like an ace bandage all the way up, like a homemade kind of compression.
That is
G-suity kind of deal.
That's crazy. Holy moly.
And what obsession I had with that at that time, that's, a whole nother conversation. And at the time, I got a lot of help because I really was passionate about it, and I had it's the most bizarre thing to have a natural gift or calling for. But it was like the most remote thing, but I was really glad that I stumbled across it.
Well, I can see that. That's when you're now doing, so just jumping right back real quick to how you do the Invisible Man. When you said you can either use it as propeller or like literally as a surfboard, basically. So when you want to initiate a twist, so let's say how do you even get out with the board? Do you literally just it's like a chairlift and you're sitting there like the bindings on a snowboard, and then you kind of hop up the way you'd go down a hill, go down the ramp out the back of the plane, and you're floating? Or is there a different way? How do you actually get into the right position before you start doing all the crazy stuff?
Well, you can, and once. Obviously, we're not talking about initially, but later, once you've developed mastery and you're playing with your imagination at this point, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So like once you're at that sort of skill place with it, you are truly limited just by your imagination. Is as simple or cheesy as it sounds, it's like our motto was not like live for your die, or it wasn't. It was like free your mind. It was like that's all you would be like repeating yourself in a way, because it was really learning this new environment of what was possible. And once you're in that place, once you really just have an understanding of where the wind is coming from and what you are presenting to it, then suddenly you're really more like this liquid thing that you can change, and it just radically changes. It's like being a plane that can completely change its form. It's incredible. So depending on where you live and what the rules are at that time, when we were flying, so there was a lot of clouds and a lot of storms and things like that. And you could basically be flying along like these cloud ridges and straight down them and go through them for 10,000 feet, at 150 miles per hour with your buddies. That's just thrilling by itself. Really. And then Skysurfing had it's for me, it's definitely sort of in a lot of ways, it's in many ways, it's a solo divergence from the crowd. In the sense of I do a lot of wingsuiting, and I do free flying, and I do tandems, and I teach, and there's a number of these disciplines that in skydiving that I'm really proficient at and that I perform in, but that are really social, Okay. And skysurfing is a solo experience. It is one that is there's, for the actual dive, if there is no camera person there to even vaguely be able to record it, because it's challenging to film because they don't have a wing and you do, right? So they're totally underpowered, and you have so much speed and torque. It's very hard to film, but so for the most part, it is. If you can imagine the ultimate, challenge yourself experience, it's this. In the most surreal environment in the world, where it's clouds, you can breathe like normal, and there's just at a sunset, with a storm somewhere nearby. It's like being on another planet.
And is that what you fell in love with? It's almost like the baby step to being an astronaut. If you could be an astronaut, would you take that deal? Is that what's going on in your head?
I think, honestly, I think a number of things. First of all, to answer that question, sure, I would do that. If my part that I would enjoy would be if I could, for NASA, develop them a way of jumping from space into the Earth. Then I would be somehow stoked about it because I really love the flying part. And flying your body, it's such its own. It's something else. Like I'm an instrument-rated pilot. I understand that concept, but this is so different. It is, and maybe it sounds like primal or whatever, but it's like activating a superhero like feeling in yourself. And I think so many of the things, like it's only just now, like I talk about doing this stuff since the 90s. Especially at that time, it was super hard to film. I mean, most of the stuff that you would be doing, like it's only in the last 10 years that I can do a lot of this stuff and film myself. And I have, my teammate that I have gold medals with that lives nearby, so we can go gather some stuff, so that's made it easy. But it's only now since GoPros and Insta360s and these kind of new technologies have come where I can, really show people, get to see these like ultra private moments in a strange way, but it's a skill that takes a little while to develop. But then you are feeling something between an astronaut. If when an astronaut finally got bored at being an astronaut.
I like that.
Right, like eventually you're bored at being in this, floating submarine, right? Like, I don't care who you're in there with, you're like, I hate you. I want to get out of here. I want to go do something. And this would be like if you could fly around in space on your own accord. That's what Skysurfing is.
And is that why you ended up breaking away from, I guess we'll call it the traditional belly down, just kind of straight falling, and you decided to branch away and say, I can invent skills, I can invent movements and learn to really fly? Is that what made you want to do that?
I wish that I could say that I had, I've got to grab some water real quick. I wish that I could say I had that sort of forethought of what the outcome would be, right? But all I can say is that at the time, anyone that I would like introduce myself, and I'm like, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a Skysurfer. Nobody was like, that's a great idea. That sounds like a real good career, kid.
Did you get a lot of backlash when you started? I could see a lot of. I bet your parents weren't too happy when you told them what you wanted to do.
That's a whole nother conversation. My mother strangely really thought it was amazing, and it was something that at the time, especially my support group or the people that felt inspired by me at that time and felt inspired to help me, they were so forceful and positive of somehow that I had this really weird talent for this thing, and that it was so like they were just like, this kid's supposed to do this. And I think that helped her, and I think my mother was a little different. She just wanted to have people that were creative. That as long as they were doing something that was artistic and different, that was what she was her main focus.
That's cool.
It wasn't something that it wasn't a real sport. It wasn't something that you were going to make money at. I didn't think when I first started I'm going to invent all these things and do all these things that I ended up doing. But but what I felt was just like a calling to it, like, oh my God, when you ever hear maybe in your life or in reality, a tuning fork, just like ring and pitch,
Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
When you feel,
yeah, it's just it calls to you.
or just you feel like that moment where you feel like, like you've found this place where you're, where you are, like, I don't know how to describe it, but like those moments, and I think everybody has them, like everybody's good at something, everybody has these like talents, and it could be so obscure and random, like sky surfing, like the idea that I found this thing is crazy to me, because it's so different and so kind of secluded, but sometimes I think when you're seeking for them, you find them, and you'll see it. You're like, oh, I'm an expert at this. Oh, sweet. And I think when you're doing that and you're in that sort of zone, that's thrilling. And if you can find that when you're young, where you're really passionate about it, and you have, passionate in a way where when you have those inevitable ups and downs of life, that only life can teach you, right?
Yeah.
That you still have a passion for it, and that you're still like, no, I'm inspired by this. So whether people are liking it or not liking it, or it's visible or not visible, like this thing charges me and gives me a perspective that like fuels me in my life in a way that like I couldn't care less.
I like that. I was gonna say, like, when you started doing all this stuff, I'm sure you started posting things online. Did the flat belly face down guys all get upset and say that you're ruining their sport or anything, or were they all like, yeah, this is cool, we should have done this earlier?
A lot of luck involved in my story, which is, a lot of ups and downs, but a lot of luck for sure. I think I trained hard, and I was super disciplined about it. But at that time, it was like it just started exploding with the X Games, and it was like just as it was coming out, it was just kind of like, oh my God! It was almost more like this thing evolved, and people just started peering for it, like drawn to it in this weird way. And when they saw me, like the learning process, like when I was like, hey, I'm going to go learn to sky surf, they're like, you're an idiot. And then when I started training it and and kind of looking like I was going to live, the guys that were good at the drop zone are going to be like, you know what, kid, if you make it to 1,000 jumps, if you live to 1,000 jumps, you're going to be pretty fucking good.
If you live. That's got to be a little scary.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it was definitely a higher stakes thing. I think that now people are under the impression that it is less dangerous now. And I don't think that it's less, in some ways, I think it's less dangerous just in the sense that you can go learn your flying in a wind tunnel, and then you can take those skills into the sky, and then now you can fly better. And because that learning process, if you had to learn everything that you can learn in the tunnel now in the sky, that takes a really long time, and that can be pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
But for you then, but like if you're still talking about then that person at 2,000 jumps, now with the wind tunnel, people jump less. They fly in the tunnel a lot more than they jump less. So like them getting 2,000 jumps of experience is really different. So so for example, 2,000 jumps can be filled with like a whole bunch of experiences. It's like the difference between cliff diving and jumping on a trampoline. Do you know what I mean? And you can be like, I do my quadruple twist 5 times a day, every day, to nail it for my cliff thing, right? And then you have people that go out and I did 2,000 cliff dives, right? You're like, holy shit, this dude's a fucking cliff beast person, right? Like, they're different. Like, they feel different when you meet them.
Well, they're the ones
And
that are actually out there doing it. So is that, and would you say that there is a big difference when you're in the wind tunnel? It's still windy and tunnely, but when you get actually in the plane, that's a whole different ball game. Is that what you're saying?
I think that let's say this, you personally, right? Just you, the spirit of person A, right? What you will fortify in, like, let's call it a month, right? A month of skydiving, which is, like a month of you, versus a month in the wind tunnel. Similar to somebody that, somebody that swims, like Ironman stuff in an ocean. Like, they're like, oh, I swim my quarter mile in the morning in the ocean. And then the person that's like, I swim my quarter mile in the pool every morning. They are not the same. They're having a different experience, right? Like, even just the environment, the elements, like someone that's embracing the ocean every day, getting sunrises, getting sunsets, whatever that thing is, their personal experience of that venture, right? Versus you in a pool.
I get it. That makes a lot of sense.
This is different. Now, I think that and then I think that the other difference, though, is that, I mean, it's not the difference, it's a good parallel for those others, but in skydiving in particular, like, let's say somebody flies for that whole month, and they can learn to fly, let's say, head down, and then you have a skydiver that learns to fly head down, right? And now they both go out on a skydive, and they both show that they can fly head down, okay? The person that was in the tunnel will not know how to exit. Like, they won't know how to jump out of the plane and find that air. It'll take them a little while to find it. And that person that was just in the tunnel won't know how to fly their parachute. They won't know how to pack their parachute. They won't know how to do any of the life-saving things that are truly important. They won't have any sense of a skydive time. Like, they'll be used to flying 5 minutes in a row, right? Instead of having known the body clock of the time. Because they come from a controlled environment,
which doesn't allow them to have to learn those adaptability and those, nuances that you can't learn in a controlled, yeah.
Well, it's also it's like a simulator, right? Like, yeah. You'll still have, there's just nuance.
Yeah, that's great. That's very, very interesting. We did some work with flyers in Poland, and I got a chance to fly in the wind tunnel. In America, they just hang on to you, which really sucks. But in Poland, it's just okay, well, good luck, don't die, And
sure.
We had Raphael, a really good guy. I'm not sure, it's a small world, but he was teaching me some stuff, and I got to front flips, back flips, nice. Front fold, back fold, and I could do the tandem thing, would go around each other and stuff like that. It was really, really, really fun. I don't know if I will probably one day jump out of a plane, but I can totally understand your analogy with the idea that, that you're in a simulator versus the real world. And that's what we're seeing with just gymnastics, trampoline, acrobatics. Everyone's kind of going out and doing parkour and all that other crazy stuff. They are basically doing the reverse almost, in a sense, of what you guys are doing, where you guys had to start out in the environment because you didn't have wind tunnels. And now you're seeing people transition more to the simulators because, again, they're safer, easier to get the kids in, more revenue, all that. And we're having the opposite problem where now people are leaving the gym because they've done the simulator a little too long. They're missing those nuances and the spice of life that you can't get in a simulator, and they're now outside, on California beach doing this, that, and the other, and it's creating a bit of a ripple throughout our industry of people that just think, oh, it's so unsafe, you can't do that. But at the end of the day, are you going to live life and under-experience what there's to offer, or are you going to simulate your life in a very controlled environment? And that's up to you to decide,
And totally, and it's interesting because you touch on something that's fascinating, and I don't want to start chasing my tail or talking in a loop about this because it's such a nuanced thing, right? Which is, I think parkour in a lot of ways is crazy. It's really crazy to learn, right? Mm-hmm. And it's something that the injuries for that are pretty incredible.
Yeah.
When they happen, right? It's like head split open, and they're like a helmet-free environment. But to me, the idea that it's so like a trampoline in that tumble environment, the idea that they are not overusing that, like I would think people would be using that like as a daily supplement and balance to go doing their stuff outside. Like I would think it'd be more like that.
We are seeing a lot of that now.
Surprised.
And they are transitioning, and I would like to see a happy balance. Right now, you got extremists on both sides. One that says, I can do it on my own because I'm cool. It's part of my image. I don't need help. But then you got the people that just rely on the help too much to the point where they never, metaphorically learn how to open their parachute when the coach isn't around. You know what I mean? And you need both. You need adaptability, but you also need some structure because adaptability and chaos. Nothing if you don't have a structure to rely back onto to give you at least a focal point,
Totally, and I think it's I'm not sure who is right, but I think that the efficiency of training and what that balance is evolves, right? I don't think that having to be environment first was. I think that I got a lot of things out of it that were super high risk, high reward, right? Yeah. That are not necessary. Like I wouldn't necessarily want my children playing that game of risk reward. I don't do that with my money, right? Like I don't. Like, do you want to try something? Put all your money in it. It's really risky. You're like, no, right? No way.
Exactly.
But it's sort of a different challenge. But whatever, I think it evolves, because it was like there were so many in that same way where I didn't have the tunnel. I would have structured training jumps where I was doing, 10 jumps a day. And on some of them I would be in this like super structure, like an exit here, practicing these two moves over and over and over until they were like perfect by my obsessive meter. You know what I mean? And then that is what gives you, that would be my trampoline to me going and chasing thunderstorms and some of the stuff that I would be doing later. So I did some projects for Red Bull where I Skysurfed a lightning storm and I had an era of doing those sorts of things, and those environment, to me, that was my real environmental adventure stuff, even though like on my regular training days I was jumping, but I always thought of that as my tunnel, like, hey, this is my training space, and then the adventure places would be where I'd be kind of performing or using those in a more spontaneous way.
It's like a happy balance. Well, can you let us know a little bit how exactly does it feel to fly through a thunderstorm?
Amazing. I wish this for everyone. I wish this for like everyone, that people somehow find a groove and where the people around them just feel compelled to encourage it. Because it's life-changing. But at the time, I was training for the X Games, and I was training for the X Games, and there was in Florida, and I was sponsored by a place that was flying a Grand Caravan, which is like a pretty decent-sized fast plane, like one used by FedEx, that holds about 20 people, and they were flying just me about 8 times a day for a summer. And it was incredible. But the pilot that they had for me was this old, like Vietnam fighter pilot or something like that, like this real, like, rusty, salty man, right?
Okay.
And attitude, like understandably, of anybody that I had ever met. Just like horrible, right? And I was just like, finally, he was just like bitching all the time. And I was just like, finally one day, I was just like, oh my God, it's just the two of us, right? You know, like, I'm just like, dude, what is your problem? Like, what is so bad? Like, do you like to fly? Do you not like to fly? What is your problem? And he's like, I don't get it. I don't get it. And I'm like, okay, well, can you fly that bucket of bolts? Or are you all talk? And he's like, yeah, I can fly this plane, you know? And I'm like, okay, all right. Well, fucking chase me out of this thing and then tell me what you think when we land. And he's like, I was like, can you do that, pilot? And he's like, yeah, I could do that. And I basically spin out of the plane, and then I fly like a quarter mile to this cloud tower, and I fly into it, and then I fly out, and then I flip upside down, and I start flying like around it, and he just sees me disappear, and then we split off. And when I landed, it was like he was hit over the head with like moon dust or something. He was just like, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen. Whatever you need, I will do. It was like the craziest, like, holy roller conversion I had ever seen to this date. And from this point on, he was like my pilot buddy. And he's like, what do you want to do? And he just literally, the two of us just went on this mission of where he would, every day during the summer, I would fly over these huge, because in Florida, you would get these huge, like clockwork thunderstorms with towering cumulus clouds that would reach from, 1,000 feet all the way up to, 13,000 feet. And he would fly me over these huge storms that would be, a mile wide, where there'd be lightning going off in the distance. And he would fly me to like an edge, and I would jump into it with my board and fly around. And sometimes it would feel like riding through chop, like riding a wakeboard or something through chop, and then all of a sudden it would open up, and then you'd kind of drop back into it, and it'd be so thick that you couldn't see the tip of the board clearly, right? Like there'd be cloud between you and it, and then lightning somewhere would go off, and the whole thing would illuminate. And you would feel just this, oh my God, I'm alive. I mean, you'd feel a part of this ominous, crazy thing that you would feel yourself I would not be conscious, but I would feel my shoulders like creep up and pull in. And then all of a sudden there would be like a flash somewhere, and as though your body knew it was happening before my mind ever did, And then you would open your parachute and land in horrible conditions because it's, raining. and that would be its own parachute piloting adventure. And that's what it would feel like. And that is a pretty deep line in the sand to walk from as far as on the boredom level. Like, that's an experience that leaves you pretty outrageously humbled, and how crazily super empowering feeling humbled is.
I understand. Were you scared of getting hit by the lightning? How do you know you weren't the next target for that lightning strike?
I was basing it on nothing scientific.
You're just hoping. You're like, okay, well, look, there's a big sky out there. They can't. I'm just a little guy here.
It didn't. It's a number of things. I think that I felt I was like a bullet being fired through, like a bullet being fired through like a rain of cannonballs or something. It was like, oh, I'm gonna slip right through there. Like, you could just see it somehow. I don't know, and I'm certain I could have been wrong. I'm not saying that that's a good basis of figuring those things out. But to me, it was like even later. So this was something that I had done times, and then I think maybe that number of times gave me a false sense of what the odds really were. But, like, for example, my father, he's Irish. Do you know many Irish people?
Yeah, we work with Ireland all the time.
Okay, so they like the lottery. They're into that stuff, right? My dad loves the lottery. Like, he loves raffles. My father has never, in the time that I've known him, ever won a raffle or a lottery. But he loves it, and he will play, and he will think it. And it's like the numbers to him are just, like, impossible. And I would see him go on this thing of this impossible thing, but it was, like, so in the reverse. I was like, I don't think I'm going to win the lottery. You know, I think that when all of a sudden you hear the statistics of what it would really be, I had very little metal on me. I was moving and ungrounded, and I was moving very, very fast. And I think that in my mind, just as stupid as riding a motorcycle in the rain is, and yet it's somehow compelling sometimes. I don't know.
I totally understand. The risk in life equals the reward sometimes. Not always, but there's definitely, if you just live a basic life and you never step outside of your comfort zone, then life can get boring real fast. I don't think I would jump right into the middle of a lightning storm like you do, but I do understand the calling there. One quick question.
I would be on the edge. I jumped on the edge. I jump on the edges of it so that you can be kind of I can exit it idea in my mind with some, at least with a chance. You're still in range of those things. But I also think that in a strange way, and I'm not sure how I would articulate it, it's a really interesting question, and I just haven't been asked it, but is how I think that in some ways, and so for every stunt that I've ever done, I'm like an overthinker, you know, like I literally am like measuring and chopping and kind of rehearsing in my mind a million times. But I think that for me, all of those things have suddenly gone from impossible to doable when you see it, right? Like and no one else may see it, right? Like everyone else is like, no, right?
Exactly.
And you can feel that in anything you do, you know. And I think that people have those moments and opportunities, and that's kind of what I meant by the humility of it more, because there's also moments where you don't see it. Like I would look down and be like, I don't see it. Like it might look the same and it might be the same from the outside, but it's like it's not the same, and I don't see your line or your thing, then I don't maybe trust it or move in the same fashion. So I think that, you know, if you are in tune with yourself and you feel those moments like that, you know, pitchfork, I think that trusting those, and I think that's a risk reward. Identifying those moments and having that would be the risk reward moment in a way that is more of a theme.
I can understand that. That sounds really, really cool. Very interesting perspective. I wanted to take a step back and ask you, what's it like to compete with, you know, I'm sure Red Bull has their own competitions, the X Games has their competitions. How does a competition for a Skysurfer go? What's the competition format?
At the time, it was a Skysurfer and a camera flyer, which instantly changes it from a solo sport to a team sport, right? Like if you imagine big wave surfing, imagine if big wave surfing was judged by the camera person that filmed it.
Yep. Okay.
So like if the camera person got the shot, they get scored higher. If the camera, well, regardless of what they were doing, like you could have somebody crushing it, but if the camera didn't get it or didn't get a framed version of it because it's harder to film, then it would be scored less high than as something that was maybe very simple and easy to film, but were captured well. So that was sort of the dynamic. So what happened was you had a camera flyer and a Skysurfer, and then it became coordinate together, which is exciting. It's cool. It ends up being its own, incredible sequence. I've had a couple of teammates that have been my teammates basically forever, and they're incredible. And you end up having a basically like an acrobatic flight around each other, and in sequence with each other, so that you can have an excellent captured video. And then that video is presented to the judges, and the judges look at your moves, and they try and rate the difficulty and the artistic factor to it. Like, was it pleasing to the eye, if it showed style, and if it looked difficult? And that was sort of the thread of it when it was competing on the X Games. I think it hasn't been a competition for it recently, and what I end up doing, for me, I'm existing and sponsored by other disciplines, and like through Red Bull, and at this point I do my Skysurfing stuff, whether it be projects and video collection and filming projects or stunt. I'm doing more in like a production capacity than in a competitive at this point.
That's very, very cool. How many competitions have you done for Skysurfing?
Just for Skysurfing, I have to go through that. It's been a little while. But I did 4 X Games, or 3 X Games and 6 X trials, and then I did 2 nationals with 2 different camera guys, and then for nationals and the other skydiving competitions, we have other disciplines. We have free flying, freestyle, and relative work, which is basically, groups of 4 flying and making a series of shapes in time. And I went and competed at each of those and got a medal at each of those, multiple medals for competing in each of those. And then I went back and I got medals for filming each of those. So I taught someone and I filmed them get a medal for those things. And then and Skysurfing's just been less of a competition for it. But at this point, doing, like I said, a number of production and video, more photo and that sort of thing, which is fine with me.
So
I enjoy it.
A lot more of your community is more about getting the good footage and basically selling that footage to different brands that will use it to basically promote products. Is that correct?
Not necessarily, not necessarily just, that's not my main sponsor or use. Like for me, Skysurfing, I am primarily sponsored and work with Red Bull, and we do 50 to 70 live shows a year, not this year, obviously.
Shows? What kind of shows?
We do. So we do like live jumps, like live stunt demo jumps into like concerts and major sporting events and Red Bull events like the F1 and all their racing stuff. And so we're doing wingsuiting performances and high performance parachute performances and shows for them, as I said, in a traditional year of 50 70 shows a year. And then we end up doing, we're a team of 10, and we each end up doing probably 3 or 4 individual video production products that are for them doing that, and then in our sport, kind of just promoting skydiving and showing potential, showing people what you can do.
That is very cool. Do you do any coaching?
I did coaching for years, and I work with the military and in advanced paratactics, and I've been doing that for the last 5 years, kind of primarily. I don't do as much coaching just because I don't have the time
No,
to it.
I understand.
And travel a bunch, and I enjoy it. I'm not opposed to it. I just don't. It's really a struggle. I got 3 kids as well, so I'm kind of a little upside down in the time department.
Yeah, you're a busy guy. Well, I won't keep you too long. I just want to ask you one more question. What is the structure of skydiving competitions? Like a global structure, the qualifiers and the nationals and then like a World Cup, like most sports, or they do something different?
They do. They have. It's changing, and it has changed over the years. It's gone through phases of certain sections of that not representing certain disciplines of the sport for a variety of reasons. Right now, there's no skysurfing competitions. I think that in the last, 5 to 10 years, the sport, there's like a real dominant shift of attention to wingsuiting. And sort of these other things, and still kind of canopy stuff. And what there are, so just as a baseline, even other than there's certain competitions that will be unique to its own, like a one-off kind of cup or something that they'll have free flying or swooping or something of that nature. And then on the national stage, they have national, not state, but they'll have national competitions, and that will qualify you for a world.
That's very cool. Very, very cool. And I guess, okay, I do want to ask, since you brought it up, you've done wingsuit flying, right?
Yep.
And how does that feel? How does that change the dynamics? Is there a difference? Is it just a matter of opinion? What's the difference between traditional flying and then wingsuit?
Wingsuits are it's definitely, they're exciting. It's different. It's something that a wingsuit ends up being. What's similar to a board is that it is a wing, right? It's suddenly a wing that you can fly. So what it's doing is it's adding power and dimension to what is possible, right? And then how you use that wing or where you use that wing is going to change a lot of your experience, right? I think that it's, going down the mountain, where you're, feet from death, and, fractions of a second from impact, if you don't do something radical, is very different maybe from cruising and coasting in the air with your buddies. So there's a lot of dimension in there. But what's really nice about a wingsuit versus like a board is that a wingsuit is a lot easier to learn. A wingsuit can be pretty intuitive. It is opposite from skysurfing in that it really is a super social. That's kind of more of a super social one, where it's really more of about you, even when you're racing and stuff like that, it's about you racing and flying with your friends, and there's a lot of people that can do it. Some people well, some people not well, but people can do it. Skysurfing is a really there are going to be some pretty scary moments. There's going to be some moments where you're really going to be wrestling with overcoming fear and overcoming, certain, like moment anxieties. You know what I mean? Like you can get PTSD from a scary moment.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
would make you, not be able to perform at the same until you're able to, push past it.
That's crazy. So what happens now with your career? Where do you go with this? Do you keep working with Red Bull and doing shows and odd competition here and there? Or do you then end up opening your own training location and just kind of investing? Or where does Sean go from here?
Well, for me, and obviously I think we're all trying to figure out and watch what is going on now with, the current situation, waiting for everything to open up, and everybody's going to try and jump back into whatever flow they can find. But for me, especially in recent years, I'm kind of diversified within my flying in that I work with Dev 1 and, military groups for the U.S. as, a staple training section. And then I do my live shows and videos with Red Bull. And then I do Hollywood stunt work. And with Union and SAG and all those things. So those three things are kind of how I am spread out in that department. And for me, on the side, probably the thing that I would be doing that is in that other vein is I do ultra VIP tandem skydive experiences. So I took Puff Daddy and I tandemed him into the Playboy Mansion, which is like a tiny spot. Jumped Steve Aoki into a tiny parking lot in Las Vegas on the street. Doing these, but some experiences where they're expensive, like a private helicopter, a private experience, super private experience for people that like to do super private experiences.
That is really cool. We saw Steve Aoki's show once. It was pretty go. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, $50 drinks. Oh my God, what's going on here? Yeah, it's
and everybody's and they're just a filled house.
Yeah. Oh, it was packed. Like there's literally 1,000 people in this really small pool that I'm pretty sure had a max capacity of 100. People were sitting on top of each other.
Absolutely.
Oh man, that's a Steve Aoki party. But Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to chit chat with us. And we definitely heard a lot of great stuff, a lot of things to think about. And what we're doing with our audience is we're trying to get them to see the perspective of different athletes with different adventures. And, we have our own pathway that we're going down, but obviously so do you and all the other athletes. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey with us a little bit. And we really appreciate you being on the show.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a great time.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed and learned a few things. There's a big world out there worth exploring, and I'm happy to be able to bring these great experiences right to you through this podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast and learned something, please share and take a screen grab of our funky cartoons and hashtag GRT certified for a chance to win a shout out to our community. Also, please leave us a review to be part of helping this information get out into the industry. It's much appreciated. Along with these podcasts, we have a large online content hub that we call the GRT Network, with many other interviews and full tutorials and written content discussing everything about acrobatics. We will be constantly growing this archive of videos like a cross between Netflix and Wikipedia for anyone in the acrobatic industry. We also have a complete online educational program for athletes of all levels that provides a do-it-yourself pathway to success for any acrobat. Check out our constantly growing library of playlists that will teach you anything from tightening up your social media, to how to get around fear, to even learning all the biology that underlies all your acrobatic skills. We work very hard with our team around the world to provide this exclusive content for you and appreciate any donations made to the FTA to help keep these episodes coming at you. And if you want all the content, become a GRT Network full member to get exclusive content before everyone else and access to special discounts and giveaways through our amazing global partners. Thanks guys, see you next episode.